Good morning, everyone. It's 7:30, so if everyone can grab your seats, we have a jam-packed morning here, so we want to get things kicked off. Wonderful. It's fantastic to hear that kind of energy this early in the morning. I guess 7:30 is not early for most of us, but fantastic to see so many familiar and new faces in the room today. I'm Jenica Ross. I'm co-president of Women in ETFs US and head of US ETF and portfolio trading at Susquehanna. So thank you everyone for taking the time here to join us this morning. This has just become such a great tradition for our organization and for our industry. The opportunity to gather together, I believe it's now 9 years after our founders gathered at the first Inside ETFs and had the vision of bringing together a group of people to support our organization and our industry. The goal of the organization, as many of you know, is to champion equality, diversity, and inclusion. Today, we're over 8,300 people from across 4 regions, 24 chapters, and 8 cities and chapters in development. I think in 2023, we're going to have the launch of several new chapters, which is just phenomenal to see that we have people continuing to want to support our group and our members. It goes without saying, ETFs are here to stay and have experienced tremendous growth across the globe. And while the number of women in leadership positions has continued to increase, there's still much work to be done. So the conversations that we're having today, I believe, will continue our journey forward. Since the pandemic in 2020, it's been incredibly difficult in many regards. But what is phenomenal to see that our organization has grown by 2,000 members since early 2020. In addition to expanding our membership, we would not be here today if it weren't for our over 50 sponsors of our organization. It is phenomenal to see the organizations that continually raise their hand and offer to join our organization to amplify our voices and our mission. So thank you to all of our sponsors, many of who are here in the room today. A few could not join us, but thank you. Our organization would not be what it is today without your continued support. Now, to kick the, yeah, that'd be great. Now, I think what's my favorite parts, we are going to introduce our 2023 Women in ETFs video. It's just a fantastic start to the conversation that we're going to have today. This year, the video has even more significance. You are going to see that it includes a very heartfelt tribute to one of our Women in ETFs founders, a former board member, and a friend to many people in this audience, Kathleen Moriarty. Emily Meyer, who's not here with us today and is my co-president of Women in ETFs in the US, is the powerhouse behind this video. She has put just such tremendous time, work, and energy into this video. So Emily, you're not here, but you're here with us in spirit. So with that, let's play this video.
Ask for money and get advice. Ask for advice, get money twice.
When Debbie Furr was thinking of creating Women in ETFs, she talked with me about it, and she said, I'm thinking of creating the same with Women in ETFs. And I said, what Women in ETFs? Because it was basically Debbie, me, and Joanne Hill.
Oh my God, that must have been such early days.
Yeah, it was. It was a long time ago.
I just wanna feel this moment. I just wanna feel this moment.
I see the future, but live for the moment. Makes sense, don't it? Now make dollars, I mean billions. I'm a genius, I mean brilliance. The streets is what schooled them and made them slicker than Slick Rick the ruler. I've lost a lot and learned a lot, but I'm still undefeated like Shooter. I'm far from cheap. I break down companies with all my peeps. Baby, we can travel the world and I can give you and all you can see. Time is money, only difference is I own it. Like a stopwatch, let's stop time and enjoy this moment, darling.
One day when my light is glowing, I'll be in my castle golden. But until just wanna feel this moment. Oh, I just wanna feel this moment. I just wanna feel this moment. I just wanna feel this moment.
I ended up being asked to work on SPY because they had decided it would be a unit trust. And the partner who was working on SPY knew I knew about them. And one day I'm in the elevator and he said, "Oh, Kathleen, these people at the Amex are trying to do a new product and it's going to be a UIT. And there are only about 5 people in the world who know what UITs are. So why don't you work on that?" I said, "Okay." And it turned out to be what turned into Spider. And it was fascinating. We all thought if we were really lucky, it would get to be $1 billion. It surpassed anything we could have guessed for 25 years, so I'm thinking it probably will surpass again for 25 years.
I mentioned that I like fairy tales, and I also like fables. So every so often, I take this book out and read it, and I just reread it about 3 weeks ago. And it's a book called Momo, and I read it every so often to remind myself that, we only have a limited amount of time on Earth.
Right.
And it is a treasure, and we should use it wisely, and we should not work all the time and not research all the time.
I've been lucky to represent a number of people who had unusual ideas. So for instance, I originally represented Wisdom Tree, who was the first group to self-index. Then I represented Pro Funds, it's actually Pro Shares, to do the inverse leverage and the leverage, and that took 7 years to get through the SEC. It was very complicated. They had lots and lots of questions. I represented the Gold Trust, GLD, and that was a whole different situation because that's not regulated by the investment company group. That's regulated by Trading and Markets and CorpFin. So we had a whole different other group to talk to about this stuff. So that was an interesting challenge. And I did work on the first Bitcoin trust. So that was really a challenge, needless to say.
Thank you. It is incredibly powerful to hear the voices of Kathleen, our founders, members of our leadership team, our members themselves, to see and feel the breadth and the scope of what our organization has become and what this industry has accomplished in the past years. You will see that there's paper and pens on the tables in front of you. If at some point this morning you would like to share a memory, an interaction that you had with Kathleen, an impact just of this industry on you personally or on your career, please feel free to jot those notes down on that paper and just leave them in the center of the table at the end of the breakfast. We are going to collect those and put together a book for Kathleen's family. So we appreciate you just taking a moment there to share any thoughts. Before we introduce our panel, and we just have a fantastic panel today, I'm very, very excited. We have the honor of recognizing this year's recipient of the Outstanding Contribution to Women in ETFs. This year's award winner is someone who's been a backbone of our organization since inception, behind the scenes, as well as last year in my place up here on the stage. This year's award is being given to Cara Pagliuca. Cara stepped into the role as head of our Boston chapter before she stepped in and joined our leadership team at the U.S. regional level as head of events and education. She served as co-president of Women in ETFs US in 2001 and 2022, and is continuing to serve as co-head of career services and as a board member for We Inc. Stepping into the co-president role, Cara was instrumental in helping to secure organizational resources that we previously did not have, and it's not something most of you see when you're out there or attending our many events, but some of the things that Cara put in place truly allowed us to become the organization that we are today, and to have the reach that we can today. It's a lot of heavy lifting to get these things off the ground, and Cara is one of the people that has made all of this possible. In addition to all the contributions that she's done to We, Cara has been a dear friend to many of us. She has been an inspiration for us to step into leadership roles within the We organization. She's tapped us, she's found us at a conference and had a conversation with us, and asked us and encouraged us to step up and find our voice and to step into the leadership role, which has been important to us individually, as well as important to our careers. So Cara, thank you for that. What we would like to, in addition to serving as co-president, Cara did the wonderful thing of changing jobs in the middle of all that she had on her plate as We president. She joined S&P Dow Jones Indices in 2022 after 20 years at State Street. So while her career and contributions to our organization are no easy lift, she's also the best mom to her 3 young daughters and a rock star coach for their field hockey and basketball teams. Cara, you deserve this award. Come on up. Okay, let's keep things going. Now, I'm going to ask our 3 guests to join us on the stage. Debbie, Jim, and Natalie, if you would come up. We are just thrilled, and obviously you'll see that we have a face up here that probably was not on our invitation and the original agenda, but like everything in life, you just got to roll with it. With us today, we've got Debbie Fuhrer, one of our founders, ETFs, and board members. We have Natalie Wolfson, who is Chief Executive Officer of AssetMark, a wealth tech firm that helps independent FAs and their clients build their business. Prior to being named CEO, she led strategy and execution for AssetMark and has more than 20 years of leadership experience across 6 financial services organizations. Prior to joining AssetMark, she was with First Eagle Investment Management and served as head of product at Pershing. She's very active in her free time. Are we still going? Yeah. Serving as board of directors of the CFP and Wealth Simple. She's a graduate of University of California, Berkeley, and earned her MBA from UCLA Anderson School of Management. Yixin Hung was our expected guest from S&P, from State Street, but unfortunately contracted COVID and is in recovery right now. So we wish her the best. And Jim was kind enough, Debbie tapped him yesterday, and he was kind enough to join us on stage. So Jim Ross, many of us hopefully know, very good friend. Jim is one of the people who was very instrumental in creating, developing, and bringing to market the first ETFs in the world, including SPY, partnered with Kathleen on many of those. He retired from State Street Global Advisors in March 2020 after 27 years with the firm, most recently serving as Executive Vice President of SSGA and Chairman of their Spider business. He currently serves as Senior Advisor to Fusion Acquisition Corp. And is a friend and advocate of our organization and of many of the people in this room. So thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Debbie. I do want to just state Chatham House rules are in effect for this morning, so we would appreciate that nothing is shared and should be repeated, or nothing should be attributed to any of the comments that are made here on stage. So thank you for abiding by that. Debbie?
So it's great to be here this morning, and I really want to thank Jim for stepping in. He's been one of the strong allies and supporters of Women ETF, so it seems appropriate that he would be asked to be here. So what we want to do this morning is cover off on 4 topics. We're going to talk on the trends in the asset management industry from their perspective. We're going to talk about trends going forward for the ETF industry, a little bit on diversity, and a little bit on careers. And Natalie and I are going, Jenica and I are going to co-moderate. So why don't we start with you, Jim? When you think about the asset management industry today, what do you see as the key drivers going forward?
Always a very broad question to start, Deb, so I appreciate that. But first of all, I'm very happy to be here. I feel bad for Yishin, but I'm always happy to step in. I think of the asset management, obviously, it continues to grow. It continues to be really important for investors. And I think that's the key to this. There's not, and the costs have come down over time, which is great for the end investors trying to really get to a result. And I think as I look at it, we're going to see continued growth across a huge spectrum of asset management. We've seen it, obviously, in ETFs. We continue to see it in the private world, in the private markets. And I think that's just because there's so many more companies deciding to stay private. I think it's important for folks to get access to that, but it's also a challenge and needs a lot of due diligence and research, as we know. But the asset management industry is great for the investor, but it also has to continue to deliver for those investors. Because if it does not, they will not get to the outcome that they need to get to. And that's the most important thing here.
Natalie, let's see if this is on. One of the things that we've seen continuing to develop is the long journey of unbundling. Can you just explain to us exactly what this means and who exactly this is going to impact?
Thank you. So I come to this meeting from a slightly different perspective. AssetMark is a platform that asset managers use to distribute to independent financial advisors. And so from the platform's perspective, there are some macro trends going on in the industry right now, which are extremely important, in my view, for all asset managers. And the great news for all of you is ETFs are a fabulous instrument to meet all those trends. So some examples, and unbundling is one of them. And unbundling is a trend because personalization is a trend. When you look at what investors want, and particularly young investors, they want their portfolios to reflect who they are and what they want to achieve with their life. And it isn't just ESG. It's also what their tax position is, what they feel about their community, and all sorts of aspects of personalization are empowered by or activated by unbundling an instrument. No longer do you have to invest in a pooled instrument to achieve your goals. You can also direct index or other things. And clearly that's a threat to those people in this room. But it's also a real opportunity, a huge opportunity, because while personalization is a macro trend and unbundling is going to continue, it's going to continue in terms of personalization for the consumer, tokenization as it relates to the types of assets that people can invest in. There's another trend, another macro trend, which is really the wind at all of your back. And that macro trend is people wanting to make things simple. And so when you look at the amount of assets that are currently in model portfolios, about 2 trillion, that's a lot. And people using UMAs, that's about 25% of all model portfolios are distributed through UMAs. ETFs are the perfect instrument for that. And so, yeah, you have this personalization trend, which is incredibly important and I think can lead to a lot of creativity and product innovation from this group. But you also have another trend, which is simplicity. to meet the needs of financial advisors trying to serve more clients, and that's where ETFs are really a great solution.
That's great. And maybe we'll unpack a little bit access to private markets, Jim. How do you see retail and different types of investors being able to access those companies that aren't coming into the public markets?
I think that's one of the challenges. There isn't a great way to access. There's platforms out there, but once again, you have to be an accredited investor. So it's not really baked to be for every investor, and I don't think it should be for every investor, to be honest with you, because I do think you have to do a lot of due diligence there. But I do think it's becoming more and more prevalent if you're working with a financial advisor that they have access. I think the key challenge there, and the key, from the asset management industry, it's great because honestly, there's, when you compare it to ETFs, there's a lot more fees there. So there's a benefit from an asset management perspective trying to bring product. But I think what we need to see is that continue to contract for the end investor to be successful in continuing to invest there. But I do think there will be opportunities on the platforms to be able to invest. I just think the investor has to really do their due diligence because not all product out there is going to be great. So.
I would agree. Thank you.
Natalie, you talk about personalization and simplification. What are your thoughts in terms of how investors are approaching the public markets versus private markets from your perspective?
So building on what Jim just said, my view, investors are approaching the public markets in an incredibly passive way, meaning they want to track, generally speaking, investors want to track the markets. They want to also invest very specifically in one particular equity. So you sort of have this barbelling approach where you're either trying to track the markets in a passive way or you have a security selection need. And both of those trends are really important in the public markets. Active investing, as we've traditionally known it in asset management, feels like it's the domain now almost exclusively in terms of flows of the private markets. And there's some reasons for that I think are really important. As someone who tries to serve advisors, who tries in those advisors attempt to help keep investors in the markets in tough times like we had in 2022, it's very difficult to explain to a broad group of investors why a manager is relative to the market under and outperforming. They could be doing absolutely everything that they say they're going to do from a process and philosophy perspective and still on paper relative to a benchmark underperform. It's very, very difficult for a financial advisor to put that investment in a financial plan and explain the results relative to the market. In private markets, though, typically that size of investor, the advisor is serving many fewer. There's stories that can be told in the private markets. And so I think that division, I shouldn't say disconnect, division is going to continue, where active investing goes in the private markets and passive investing or individual security selection when an investor wants to invest in one stock, not an asset manager, will continue in the public markets.
That's great. So let's turn to ETFs. And Jim, you're not directly involved with running a business today, but as you look out, there's been a lot going on. ETFs have had their second best year last year in terms of flows, doing really well. What do you see as the key drivers going forward if you were to identify what you see?
Obviously, the ETF growth continues to be amazing. I'm looking at 2022 and I'm like, oh, that was a down year kind of, which when you think about it, is kind of crazy when the amount of flows that went into ETFs. But there's just significant drivers. A lot of them are platforms. A lot of them are just ways people access ETFs. And then obviously there's different types of ETFs. I still think we're in the very early days of fixed income ETFs. I still think there's a ton of growth available there. And I think there's a lot, and you see customization is huge there, and people are customizing their portfolios with ETFs, but they've been doing that for years, whether it's been the advisors starting that or even individuals today. I think we're just going to see more of that, and it becoming the vehicle of choice. And then we see all these trends of different kinds of ETFs coming to market. I think of 2022 as the year of active ETFs, and the growth of that between, semi-transparent, starting to catch on, and then a lot of folks are saying we can be transparent in the equity markets and bring ETFs. We've had active ETFs for a while, but I know this year was one of the largest. You would have the numbers better than me, Deb. I try not to fill my head with numbers. I just get lost with that. But, I think in all seriousness, the growth of ETFs continues to come from so many different segments. It's not just U.S. large cap equity anymore, even though that still grows tremendously. So I think across the board, there's just a lot. And listen, the reasons are very obvious. It's a good product for investors, whether they're just starting to invest or really trying to customize their entire portfolio or just outsourcing it to their trusted advisor.
Now, Natalie, you see such an interesting cross-section of investors through the AssetMark platform. And fixed income was something that I've heard you say was a top trend from a different perspective. Can you share your outlook for the fixed income space?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is not news to any of you, but for the first time in a long time, not for the first time ever, first time in a long time, there's attractive yields, risk-adjusted yields in fixed income right now. And advisors have been searching for, and investors have been searching for those yields for a long time. And so while 2022 was arguably one of the worst years for fixed income in a generation, it's created an environment where fixed income's appealing on a risk-adjusted basis. Like right now, we are all being paid to be defensive in treasuries. And that's an extraordinarily good thing in terms of investors starting to appreciate what fixed income can bring to the table. And I would argue one of the biggest opportunities in this room. Fixed income is incredibly efficiently distributed in an ETF, particularly for smaller account sizes. And investors who were feeling very, very confident in 2020 and 2021 that they didn't need advice, or they didn't, and advice broadly speaking, advice of a portfolio manager, advice of an advisor, are now leaning in to needing advice. In fact, over half of investors say that they feel like they need an advisor of one kind or the other helping them with their investments. And ETFs can help investors have the right risk-adjusted portfolio, and fixed income can help with a huge part of that portfolio. So it's exciting times, in my view, right now, as it relates to fixed income, and a big opportunity for all of us. I know there's a debate, the death of the 60-40 portfolio and all of that. It's interesting to me, you pick the worst year maybe in history for an instrument and say it's dead. Well, every instrument has its worst year ever. And that's usually when the opportunity is right in front of you.
So Jim, I'd love to unpack a little bit on active ETFs. I can remember when the first active one came to market in the US, Bear Stearns, why? And the comment from many in the industry was, why do we need active ETFs? They thought it was index, and it is impressive that SPY is still the largest ETF in terms of assets, given it's just celebrated 30 years. When we think about active, it's been interesting to me to see that many have come to market with transparent active. So how do you think about conversions and new entrants coming into the ETF industry in the active space?
So I think everyone knows I go back a long time. I go back to the day there was 3 of us, we were all indexers, and honestly no one would come in the room because it was seen as kind of boring and not really mainstream. And it was when really some of the larger asset managers that were more active came into the space that actually created more demand for ETFs. So that's going back a long time. I'll date myself. Everyone knows I was involved 30 years ago. So, but I think of it today, okay, now it's like you have to have an ETF strategy if you're a large asset manager. You don't have a choice. And years ago, and trust me, I've had conversations for a number of years with large asset managers who said, I will never be in ETFs that are in ETFs today. And every once in a while looking like, why not? But I think we have to remember, like, the ETF as an investment vehicle is used by active investors. I think a lot of folks think of ETFs as indexes. Oh, that's just for indexing folks. But many of the advisors are using them to produce an active outcome. They're just choosing the vehicle of choice for them to implement that is ETFs. So I think transitioning to active ETFs is a natural thought process. Once again, active comes down to one thing. You are offering to the investor that you believe you can outperform. The delivery of that is the most important thing. And I think that's where the challenge for active will come in, but that's also where the opportunity is. And I think that's why so many folks are looking at this as an opportunity to come into the ETF market with a differentiated product that they've had for years in their shop. They have great experience. They have the ability to then transition to this. And I think it's the long-term success of that is going to be, how do they deliver for their investors? How do they deliver for the folks that they're talking to today about, this is how you come into our product? And to me, it's just I remember when I first talked to the folks at DoubleLine about bringing an active ETF, And Jeffrey Gunline just looked at me and goes, so pretty much I run my portfolio like I run it today. And you'll deal with all that back office stuff. I'm like, yeah. And he's just another distribution channel for us. Nah, he goes, I like that idea. We'll do this. So.
Good decision.
Yeah, I think a lot of retail investors are pushing, and financial advisors are pushing asset managers to launch ETFs. So I think that's an interesting trend.
Yeah, one of the other things, you mentioned it before, Natalie, that we've seen incredible demand for, and people coming to the market with the model portfolios. What do you see sort of at this inflection point with where model portfolios are? Where do you think this goes, and what's the impact on sort of retail investors?
Yeah, so, like ETFs, model portfolios are a very efficient way for an advisor or for a platform to deliver their point of view. Like when you look at the advisors, I'm just going to take the advisor first because it's a large and growing part of the market, and I would argue will be increasingly important part of the market for a long time. That's another macro trend, the move to advice. But when you think about an advisor's day, what they need to do is serve probably somewhere between 200 and 1,000 clients with a very small team if you're an RAA or an entrepreneur. And each of those clients wants their portfolio to be as personal as possible. So technology comes in and helps the portfolio be personal through a UMA and tax transition, all those things, or tax management, all those things. But what an advisor needs is for those portfolios to be efficiently executed. And the easiest way for them to do that is for them to build practice models, or for them to use models that have been constructed by third parties, and then apply those models to segments of their clients that have similar needs. So it's sort of mass customization in a way. And the nice thing about that for an advisor is they're not only outsourcing the asset management, what all the ETF providers in this room do, they're also outsourcing the portfolio construction. So putting those ETFs or mutual funds or individual securities in a single portfolio. And models and UMA account structures are really efficient for the advisor, and ETFs are a very efficient vehicle in the model. And so, for me, model portfolios are going to continue to grow. There's a reason that asset allocation, model portfolios and asset allocation portfolios are so popular, and it's because they take so much time that the advisor was spending or the investor was spending on administrative parts of their portfolio out of their life. And then what advisors are doing is they're redeploying that time to financial planning. And that financial plan, if you put it in place, the investor expects the advisor to track to it. And again, model portfolios are a very efficient way for advisors to track progress relative to goal within risk tolerance. And so to me, it all comes back to that mega trend of simplification and customization. Model portfolios and ETFs really empower those things.
Fantastic. I'd like to perhaps pivot here just a little bit, because obviously one of the core pillars and missions of women in ETFs is diversity and inclusion. It is something that our industry has not been the best at historically. Natalie, perhaps we'll start with you. Could you give us your thoughts in terms of where we're at when it comes to diversity and actually taking action within our industry?
Well, the first thing I just want to say is, wow, look at this group. This is really exciting. To see such a broad and diverse group that's focused on women in the industry. Stu and I were talking as we were having coffee before everyone entered the room. This is really, for those of us who've been in the industry for 30 years, myself included, this is really a huge change and an important change. So I want to just say that as background before I say the second thing I'm going to say, which is, as it relates to diversity and inclusion, I really think the industry's stuck, stalled. We've gotten to a point, we're about 20% in senior level positions, and we've been there for a while. We just can't seem to break through those barriers. And I'll tell you, when I was named CEO, my CFO pulled all the companies in the Russell 2, all the, companies that are publicly traded like AssetMark in the same category as us, and it was 6% women CEOs on that list. And I attend CEO conferences 3 or 4 times a year, and I am regularly one of 2 or 3 women in the room of hundreds. And the same thing's true, by the way, of people of color. You know, they're in the room, one or two, and it just, that we need to do more. And I really believe that every single person in this room has a lot to contribute to breaking through that stalled 20%. If we can mentor, if we can challenge, if we can advocate for one or two other people in a real and meaningful way, it makes a huge difference. All of us, if we're in meetings and somebody's been, you know, ignored or talked over, their point of view is not shared, if you can just say, hey, no, I really want to know what she has to say, we can make big changes in the industry. It's just these little things we all can do that I think are so important. And you know, that stalling, we all have to own it. I own it every day. You know, we all have to answer that call from someone who's looking for advice, and you know, invest in that next generation of talent.
Yeah, and I think we have to applaud Jim because he was one of the early supporters of women ETFs, putting money in, but also attending events and doing a lot to, I think, move the needle. So I'm going to put you on the spot. And unfortunately, Jim doesn't even know these questions, right? Because he stepped in at the last minute. So I may get reprimanded after this event today, but anyway. So Jim, when you think about the work you were doing, because I know you did a lot of things to help promote women and diversity, are there any tips in terms of things that worked well that you could share as you look back on your career?
You know, it's a hugely challenging question, and I'm going to be very honest with this room. I don't think I was very good at it in the early days. Yes, was I an early supporter of women in ETFs? Yes, because a woman who worked for me walked into my office and said, Jim, you are writing this check, don't ask any more questions. And anyone who knows Jill Mavro, I was not saying no to her. So, but I was like, I don't know what it is, Jill, but if you need a check for this, yes, we're good. But I don't think I completely got the importance of it for a number of years. And I literally think it had to grow on me. And I'm just being very honest there. I don't think I was very good at it in the early days. And it was very new. And I'm going to make a comment to kind of follow on what you said. We're kind of stuck. So Kathleen, who was obviously a very good friend of mine over the years, was in a podcast about 6 months ago, and they asked her about diversity and inclusion. Have you made progress? Since she was, in many cases, the only woman at dinners that I was with. And it would be 10, 15, 20 guys and Kathleen. And it was always funny that she was always there. But in that podcast about 6 months ago, her answer was, we've made marginal improvements. You know? And I heard that, and I'm like, wow. Like, here I am thinking we've made significant improvement as an industry, but I know I'm wrong. So honestly, I think some of the things from me, mentorship is a big piece of how I think about it. Somebody asked me, why do I keep, you know, Jim, you're back in Florida, that's great, you're here, but why are you here? I'm like, this is where my mentees are, and I like to see them. And there's a broad group of them, and then there's a narrow group of them. And I'm like, but interestingly for me, and this was purposeful, a number of years ago, most of my mentees are women. And that was intentional. And it was and it's not that I don't have a lot of men in their industry that I talk to and think I help along. Usually that's around, I'm thinking about jobs, something. I do that. But I'm very purposeful around certain mentees I've had for a long time in trying to make sure I am there for them. But I completely agree. This whole world of diversity and inclusion needs to continue to grow and expand. And I think it's a huge challenge for the industry because I don't think anyone knows the exact right way.
Those are really heartfelt comments. Really appreciate it, Jim. And you have been a supporter to everyone. So thank you.
Maybe we could get some insight in terms of both of your histories, sort of how you've ended up in the seat that you're here on stage with us today. Natalie, perhaps you could start. Did you know that you wanted to work in the financial services industry as a child? Was that on the paper when you submitted your career request at school?
Not even as a college graduate did I know I wanted to be in the financial services industry. You know, it's something I try to tell people that I'm mentoring all the time. It's never, you know, you're never locked in. There's always choice and options. I didn't know I wanted to be in the financial services industry until I randomly got my first job in the financial services industry. I think this is going in. Can you guys hear me all right? All right, you all, I should say, hear me all right? I was very lucky. My first job happened to be at American Express, which was in payments and financial services. And I loved it. Like, I loved everything about the industry, and it made me want to explore different parts of the industry. And then I decided I wanted to try something new. I decided I wanted to go into the brokerage side of the industry, worked for Charles Schwab for 10 years. Financial services is a great industry to be in, as you all know, because it's creative and innovative and growing, which is absolutely fantastic. But I had not a single course in finance, not a single course in business. I had no idea what an ETF, mutual fund, option, bond, anything was when I started my career. I learned it all on the job. And so, those of you who have degrees in political science, got a great future ahead of you.
So, Jim, the same question to you.
Just don't go into politics.
That's
Sorry.
right. That's right.
The same question to you. Growing up, did you know you wanted to be in financial services?
Well, I saw this ETF thing, and I thought of a vision. No, absolutely not. So my path to State Street was pretty simple. I started my career in public accounting. I was an accounting major in college. I spent 3.5 years at a very large firm, and I hated it. And all I wanted to do my last year, I think I worked 92 straight days. There was no days off. And and it was crazy because it was scheduled. So you had to work from 10 to 2 on Sundays. I'm like, can I just work 14 hours on Saturday? Like, no. I'm like, okay, this career is not for me. And honestly, I did a bunch of different audits. I did large insurance companies. I did government audits. I also did this thing called investment companies. And the first job I was offered happened to be in State Street in investment companies. I took it. It was that simple. And that was my exit out into State Street. I think many of you have heard the story, but as far as 30 years ago, I joined State Street in July of '92. I got put on that project in November of 1992. As I like to say, after all the hard work was done by many folks, including Kathleen, who had been working on that since 1989. So for me, I was young, I was willing to work hard, but I did not necessarily know, I didn't know what a mutual fund was when I was in college. I didn't have any money to invest. I was working for State Street for a number of years before I had a dime to invest, before I could even buy an ETF, even though I was helping launch ETFs. So.
And I love these stories because it's actually funny, Natalie. I started my career at UBS, and I was working at the Career Services Fair at our college, and the person from UBS was stealing the lollipops off of our desk. And I was like, aren't I at the nonprofit? Aren't you a for-profit company? Shouldn't you be the one that's providing the lollipops? But had a conversation, and I knew nothing about the industry as well, and that's sort of how I ended up in my first role. And I think to that point, one of the things that's really important to us within the organization is our university outreach program. And I think having those conversations with people before they even end up in their first or second seats within the career is so critical, because if you don't know about it, we're not even starting in the game. So I think that university outreach, and even earlier than that, is really critical to us achieving some of the things that we want to achieve within this industry: diversity, inclusion, and all of those things. Natalie, you've made some really big pivots, in your career. How did you decide, when to make those changes, and sort of what was your headspace in terms of, this is the time I need to make a change?
So other than the pivot from payments to brokerage, I also worked in technology product development. So I launched Charles Schwab's wireless trading platform, the first generation of that. I also launched Charles Schwab's first ETFs. So, financial product development, technology product development, strategy, marketing. So those are big pivots. Those are completely different disciplines. And it's easy to believe that if you're not a technology product developer, you don't write code, that you have nothing to offer. Or if you're not a portfolio manager or don't have history in ETF construction in some way or form, you don't have anything to contribute. And both of those platforms, I would argue, were transformative for the industry in their own way. And what I would just say is, sometimes people ask you, they say, Natalie or whoever, would you do this? And it's scary because it's new and you don't feel prepared. But just know that that person wouldn't be asking you if they didn't believe you could do it. People don't give responsibilities to individuals if they think they're going to fail. They give responsibility or opportunities to individuals because they know they're going to succeed. And so just take confidence in yourself that you're being given that opportunity because you have fundamentals that they think are what, you know, the company needs. The second thing I'll just say is don't yourself get stuck. You know, I've worked at companies for a long time and realized that the opportunities for growth just weren't there. For one reason, it had nothing to do with me, had everything to do with things that were happening around me. And for your own career, when that happens to you, it's your responsibility to leave and to go to a place where people will reward and recognize your talent. And so sometimes you pivot because you're being given an opportunity that's scary and new. And my advice to all of you is take it with both hands. It's going to be the best time of your career. And other times it's because you're looking around yourself and you're realizing that either the rewards and recognition aren't there or you're just not challenged. Leave. Because when you're not challenged and you're not feeling inspired, you're not going to do great work. And so, you know, to my point earlier about being stuck, unstuck yourself.
So, Jim, you spent 27 years at State Street. How did you think about your career and what were the key pivotal points in it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I spent 27 years at State Street, and everyone's like, so you never left? You've only been in one place. You did the same thing. I'm like, I did many different things. And that was it, all right? I found the opportunity and sometimes the need to pivot, but I found it within the company. And my seminal moment, so my first, you know, and I'm going to joke a little bit about something. So yesterday we were with the group and Dave Abner mentioned, I remember the early days when we tried to teach people create and redeem. I'm like, I could go whiteboard that right now. That was the early days. I was in the back office side of State Street. I grew into a role there, transitioned, got more responsibility. I had like 60 people working for me, which was a lot. And this is 1999. I'm helping launch the Hong Kong Tracker Fund. I'm flying to and from Hong Kong. I'm doing this job. And the guy from SSGA looks at me and said, we're starting the business of ETFs. SSGA is going to run the business of ETFs. I want you to come work for me. And here was the job offer. I can't give you any more comp right now. I'm like, okay, that's really appealing. You're going to have 0 people working for you to start. It was going to be a team of 3 or 4 people, and I have no idea if this is going to be successful. What do you think? I'm like, I'm in. It was 100% the right move for me. My boss and my boss's boss were very, very angry with me. And I'm like, trust me, this is the right thing for State Street across if we can do this and do this right. But it was a huge leap of faith. And trust me, there was times in those early days, especially when you're trying to fund a new business within a large global bank, and no one had a lot of faith in it, and you have competitors out there who are funding their new business and competing with you with 10 times the investment, and you are literally scraping to do anything. Everyone knows about GLD. No one knows how much we did that on a shoestring. And the head of my internal desk, when we launched GLD, I walked back into the office, and he looked at me and goes, what the hell did you just do to us? Phones are ringing off the hook. We couldn't even answer all of them. Because once you launch a gold product, you get a very, very interesting cross-section of folks who are going to call you and ask you to send you a gold bar because they bought a share. That was not the way GLD works. But yeah, so that was literally, you know, I mean, that was my biggest career pivot. And then within that, I continue to look at opportunities. Many folks, I looked at opportunities within State Street and outside of State Street. And there was definitely times I think this might be the right time to leave. Something happened. I got additional responsibility, and I stayed. So it's one of those, like, what I say to everyone, it's like, you don't have to stay at the same place, but you have to make sure you're finding opportunities. Or if they're finding you for opportunities, and you're taking them. So I completely agree with that. I just was able to do it within a very large organization.
Thank you.
Natalie, those are fantastic points I think you made about sort of how to continue your career. Do you have any tips or advice that you could provide in terms of how to leverage mentorship, networking, sponsorship in ways that can help us all?
So mentorship and sponsorship are 2 very different things. I'm going to talk about mentorship first because I think they're both really important. With mentorship, to me, the most important thing is that you have a good understanding of what it is you want to achieve from the mentoring relationship. So we all know that there are aspirations, what our aspirations are, what we'd like to achieve with our career, and that there are things that are getting in the way. And those things are unique to all of us. And so rather than picking a mentor saying, ooh, this is a CEO, I'm going to pick her as my mentor, instead think about what you want to achieve through the mentoring relationship and pick people who can help you with those things. I have mentoring relationships that have lasted a year, that have lasted 6 months, and some that have lasted, many, many years. And all of those are really effective. For example, I was really at one point struggling with, my voice in a large organization. And so I picked somebody in that organization who was incredibly good at being heard. And we just talked about how he did that in our mentoring sessions. And it was great for him because it was really specific. He knew exactly what he was mentoring me for. And it was great for me because I got really specific advice about those things. So mentoring, know what you want to improve on or build on, and pick people that are great at those things. It's a compliment to them, too. And then the relationship either lasts in terms of the mentoring relationship or has a fixed duration depending on what it is you want to achieve. I can tell you being specific is so huge in these mentoring relationships. And then the second thing as it relates to sponsorship. So sponsorship is something that can happen because you engage in a relationship with somebody and tell them that you have career aspirations that are broader than they know. So somebody in a different, like for example for me, when I joined the technology organization of Schwab, I needed a sponsor in that organization. I had no technology experience. I didn't know how technology organizations ran. And so I proactively asked he was an architect, like a head architect, to help me with that. And he was my sponsor. So in conversations that he was part of, when they were looking for great product developers, my name came up because he was my sponsor. And I asked for that. Sometimes that works. Other times, a sponsor reaches out to you. And so it usually happens in a development conversation, like one of those conversations where somebody says, hey, you did something and here's the unintended consequence of it. Or they just tell you you messed up. In those conversations, say, hey, I've got these goals and would you sponsor me? And most of the time, you have to ask. And that's what makes sponsorship conversations really hard. Because it's hard to ask somebody to sponsor you for other opportunities. Feels like that should happen to you, should be given to you. But I promise you, if you ask somebody, would you sponsor me, you're either going to have a great development conversation where you're going to learn things about yourself you wouldn't otherwise know, or you're going to have a sponsor at the end of it. But sponsors actively, proactively think of you for opportunities. They're your advocate. Mentors are your coach. And so make sure you have both.
That's great insight. Jim, when you were growing in your career, did you have mentors and sponsors? And I'd be interested to understand, how have you ended up in mentoring relationships with women? Because I think everyone would love to have your advice. So how did that come about?
I'm not convinced everyone wants my advice, but okay, Deb. No, so over the years, I had, I think, a number of folks that I worked with that were somewhat mentors to me, but it was more like I observed them. I was that guy that didn't want to ask for time. But I took a lot from the different folks I worked for over the years, some good, some not so good. And I'm like, okay, don't want to be that, don't want to be that, but, but absolutely unbelievable how they do this. I took it from CEOs of SSGA, I took it from bosses I worked for, I took it from just observing people. But then when it came to, I was in that position, then I really wanted to be, and I never really separated sponsorship from mentorship. To me, I was a mentor. If that meant I could sponsor somebody, I would, but I don't think I was ever that purposeful around it. But I always wanted to try and make sure I understood kind of what people were thinking. And I very much tried to have an open door policy, which is a challenge, honestly, when you have a very crazy calendar. And I had a very good assistant who was very purposeful in making sure I had time for certain things, but not for everything. So, but I looked at it as like, how can, if someone's coming to me, I may not have the job for them. And I've had very direct mentoring conversations where my answer was, your next job is not here at State Street. You need to look at your other opportunities. You want to be in your boss's job, and that job is not coming open anytime soon that I can see, and I don't see a pivot for you that it's going to make you successful here. So that's obviously a challenging conversation. Sometimes those would start in my office. I'm like, no, we cannot have this conversation in my office, so let's go meet for coffee, because there's certain conversations I'm like, I don't know if I should be, because the person's boss might not be very happy with me when I tell them to leave. But I think from my perspective, it was always kind of like, how do you look at it from an individual standpoint, and how do you make sure that you try and make time for those conversations, whether it's informal or formal. And I'm a very big person about just catching up informally, whether it's coffee, a drink. I know, and sometimes I understand that you can't do that. And I've learned that over the years. Like, my idea was like, hey, let's just go grab a drink. Well, some folks just can't do that. Some folks are raising 3 kids, and they have to get home. And I get that. So I'm like, I had that over the years. I had to be really purposeful, like, make sure you find the time within other people's time frames, and don't just think of it as you think of it. But I always make, my only ask over the years, and it was very similar to what you just said, is if you're going to ask for my time, be purposeful, tell me what you're thinking, and be respectful of the time. So if I said I have 15 minutes, don't come in and chat for 10 minutes and then want 30, because I don't have the time. But and I would try and make it, but it was one of those challenges. So that's kind of how I think about it. I never really thought about it as big and like all these different terms today, because I was kind of one of those old guys, and I say that, like, I have no problem saying that. But I did really, really want to engage and talk to different folks and try and take some of the things that I had learned from observation more than mentorship and pass them on.
That's great. And unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up. I think, big round of applause for Jim for stepping in at the 11th hour. And also Natalie. I mean, she accepted to join us, come out here to share her impact. And clearly, she's also had some experience with Charles Schwab and also has helped this industry. So please do thank her and do thank Jennifer. And I am going to let Jenica wrap up, but I would like to say there's an army of people, everyone who works for Women ETFs, and work is like a job, but everyone is a volunteer, and there's a big army of people who help to stuff the bags, help to do everything. And behind the scenes, one of my colleagues, Margarita, took on the task of being a contractor to help with this event. And I can tell you, she's been working crazy hours. She lives in Slovakia and has been up till 2 in the morning. But yeah, so there's a big army of people, and I just would like to acknowledge everyone, not by name, but to say thank you to everyone who has supported and all the sponsors. And I will let Jenica do the closing remarks.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is incredible. Natalie, thank you. Jim, thank you. Debbie, thank you for all the work, for joining us. This is just the start to our couple days together. So I love that we have this event at the beginning of Monday morning, and now we can all engage with each other throughout the conference, have some conversations, and 2023 is going to be an incredible year. We have so many events happening. We are going to be back in person here, across the country, across the globe, so we're incredibly excited. Thank you for the support, and let's have some fun at the conference.